channel. I'm Angela Vorpal, and in this video we are going to be touching on the very taboo topic of money, but not just touching it, making full-on contact, because I'm going to share with you guys the income and expenses that I had in two very different jobs, in two very different sectors, in two very different geographical locations right out of law school, to give you an idea of what you can expect in your first jobs out of law school, and also what the income expense ratio is in different parts of the country in different legal sectors. I was sort of hesitant to post this video, but I figured that on the off chance it helps give somebody insight into the legal industry, job market, or plan financially for their future, that it would be worth it. So if you're excited to dive in, smash that like button and let's go. So I'm going to show you guys a comparison of my income and expenses for a month when I was a federal judicial clerk in Dallas, Texas, and a month when I was an associate at a law firm in New York, to give you just a inside glance into what a typical month might have been for these two very different jobs, two very different locations. So when I graduated law school in May of 2011, took the bar in July of 2011, and started the clerkship right away in August of 2011. And the clerkship was for a year, so which is pretty typical of clerkships. Some clerkships last 2 years, depending on the judge, but this one was a year. In Dallas, my yearly income as a federal clerk was $66,000, and I went back and looked at my tax form for that year, and my federal, state, and city taxes were 18%, which meant that my in-pocket income for the year was $54,120, which meant that my yearly in-pocket income was $4,510. For rent, I lived in a pretty spacious one-bedroom apartment in central Dallas, not uptown or downtown, but very accessible. Really, really liked the place. Shout out Tonti Lakeside Apartments. And I paid $950 a month. I paid $66 a month in utilities, light, gas, water, internet. My cell phone bill was $117. Transportation, which really just meant filling up my tank of gas twice that month, was $88. And big purchases were $485. I made this category for things that weren't normal monthly purchases. So things like buying a piece of furniture, or maybe getting tickets to a show that I wouldn't normally buy on a monthly basis. And then I have an everything else category, which is kind of a free-for-all. And that is obviously the biggest category. I spent $1,640. And that's things like groceries, laundry, if I need to go to the pharmacy for something, if I bought lunch or bought dinner, any household items, and if I went out at all. So entertainment. And just a caveat so that you guys know, I don't think I cooked more than 3 times that year in Dallas. And so pretty much all of my lunches and all of my dinners were bought out. So take that into consideration for that particular price item. And that brought my monthly expenses to $3,346. And at the time, I wasn't really budgeting. I was doing sort of retroactive budgeting, meaning I knew I was making enough money to pay for all of my expenses, and so I didn't really have to hold back on anything, but I did want to see how much I was spending versus how much I was saving. And I didn't go by a specific formula or anything, but I did recently hear about the 40-30-20 budget plan, with 50% of your monthly income going to things you need, 30% going to things you want, and 20% going to savings. And so I just wanted, just sort of as some sort of benchmark, see what that percentage would have been for my time that month in Dallas. And my expenses were almost 75%, with savings at 20, so 74, 26, 75, 25 split. So within that, someone's idea of what a budget should look like. A couple of things to note on the Dallas side. Texas doesn't have any state or city income taxes, and so this 18% up here is purely federal. So that is a bonus feature of living in a state that does not have those additional taxes. And another thing to note on the expenses side is that I don't have a student loan monthly payment, and that is because I actually got a full ride scholarship to law school, and so the only money that I owed was money I had borrowed from my parents bonus and wound up paying them back within the first few months after graduation. So I was very, very fortunate not to have that as a monthly expense. But if you were coming out of law school, for most people, that is absolutely something that's going to have to start being paid back almost immediately. So keep that in mind. And so, yeah, so that's Dallas. That's Federal Judicial Clerkship. If you guys have any questions about the clerkship or the payment or my expenses or Dallas or anything like that, leave them in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Moving on to New York. This was July 2013, and keep in mind that I came in as a second-year associate. I actually don't know if I told you guys that, but if you get a clerkship, most law firms will consider that as your first year at the firm, so they don't dock you a year. You come in as a second-year associate in terms of salary and in terms of seniority, and so you don't lose any years towards your partnership path. So that's a bonus as well. So that year I made $192,000. That amount would have been for a second year associate. It would not have reflected the clerkship bonus, which they would have paid me in 2012, the year before. The taxes for federal, state, and city were around 30%, so much higher. New York has both state and city taxes. So just another point to keep in mind. It's, as you can imagine, in lots of ways, very expensive to live there. And then my yearly income after taxes, taking out that 30%, is $134,400 for the year in hand. And so that means I had $11,200 to spend in any given month of that year. My rent that I paid for a small studio apartment near Union Square, which I absolutely loved. I was in love with that apartment. I paid $2,300 a month for it, which is definitely high. I mean, it's New York high, but it's also pretty standard for the area. But there are absolutely more affordable options in New York. You can live in less expensive neighborhoods. I recently spent a month in Harlem, loved it. There's, of course, Brooklyn. The further out you go, Queens, Astoria areas, your Upper East Side, lots of different neighborhoods where you can find more spacious places for less money. So that's what I opted to spend, and I don't regret it. It was a wonderful apartment. The utilities, I looked back and they were $55, which actually surprised me. It was definitely a much smaller space than my Dallas apartment, but I was still surprised that it was so low. I tended to remember it being more expensive, but the numbers don't lie, I guess. My cell phone bill was $88, and it was lower because the firm actually subsidized our cell phone bill a little bit, some percentage, based on the rationale that we were using our work emails on the phone, and so they decided to compensate us for that. Some firms actually give you a totally separate phone. I have to say that having everything on one phone is much more convenient. And you are connected 24/7, but you're going to be connected 24/7 to work anyway, even if you have two phones. So one phone is definitely preferable. The transportation expenses that month were $145, which would have been reflected in an unlimited subway or unlimited metro pass, which I think was around $115, and then about $30 more on taxis that I spent for that month. Big purchases were about the same, $540. One thing I will say is that I'm a huge fan of buying home decor items, which I was able to do a lot more of in Dallas because I had more space. And in New York, it was such a tiny apartment that there really was nowhere else to put things. And so I was forced to restrain myself. So that could be reflected in less money than I otherwise would have spent. And then the everything else category actually surprised me. I spent $1,030 that month, which I would have expected it to be much higher. And I actually went back and looked at a couple months before and a couple months after, and they were around the same. And the only thing I can think to attribute it to, I should say, is that groceries, food, going out is definitely more expensive in New York than it is in Dallas. But I wonder if maybe I was going out a lot less in New York because I was working so much. Maybe that could have been part of it. The other part of it might have also been that a lot of law firms in New York will pay for your dinner if you are working past a certain time. So I think our informal time cutoff was like 8:30 or 9. If you're going to be working past then you can buy dinner up to $35. At least that was the practice back then. And so that could have been attributed to the fact that I wasn't buying as much food. So that's a possibility. But I do have to warn you that number surprises me a bit. But nevertheless, there you go. And so my total monthly expenses were $4,158. So about $800 more than Dallas. Again, you would need to take into account what you're willing to pay for rent, also any student loan debt that you're going to pay off. And so to do the percentages, just to get a sense, my expenses were 37% of my monthly income, and my savings were 63% of my monthly income. So obviously a ton more just based on the income itself. And one of the things I will reiterate, which I mentioned in another video that I made called The Truth About a Big Law Firm Salary, is that the best decision I ever made when I started working for a law firm is that depending on your point of view, but I spent relatively modestly, much less than I, in theory, could have. And the result of that was that I was able to save a ton of money, and I was able to make myself financially independent. And I didn't need the job to make ends meet. And again, my largest expenses you can see was rent, which I could have obviously cut down even more. I could have gotten a roommate if I needed to, and if I had to have, I absolutely would have, to still have maintained that financial independence, because it really allows you to do anything. It allows you to change jobs. It allows you to leave the legal industry altogether. It allows you to be able to start a family without thinking twice, to start a new business without thinking twice, and so it really does make a huge difference. As opposed to a lot of the associates and colleagues I was working with felt like they had to stay, felt like they were stuck and that they couldn't leave, not only because of student loan debt, but also because of the house or apartment they had purchased, or the schools they had put their kids in, or the high ticket items that they had come to become accustomed to. So keep that in mind. But anyway, here are the numbers. Let me know in the comments below if you guys have any questions about New York, about Dallas, about how much I spent, about how much I made. I like to consider myself an open book, so I don't think that I've had a question yet that I wasn't willing to answer. So don't hold back. And I hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive. It was fun putting it together and sort of reminiscing on old times. And that's it. I hope it was helpful.